Joining us now here in studio, Angus Toulouse. He is the Ontario Regional Chief for the Assembly of First Nations. And Chief, it's good to have you back in that chair.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Well, we want to talk about water. How would you describe, generally speaking, the state of Ontario's First Nations water infrastructure today?
Well, let me just start off by saying it's deplorable. We've come through Walkerton in Ontario. We've heard certainly the Premier say that not in Ontario, it's not going to happen here. We have right now as many as 72 that are considered high risk water treatment facilities. There's 60 some that are considered medium risk, and 20 some that are okay. But there's 27, I believe, that are on some boil water advisory right now.
I got all the numbers. I'm going to come up to them later.
Okay.
But I just tell us, for starters, where do you get your water from?
Well, it comes from like any place else, from the lakes, from the aquifer. It comes from wherever closest to the First Nation. So it's not unlike anywhere else in any municipality, any town. It comes from the same source.
And you dispose of it the same way too?
We're in a situation where we do have sewers that are in some of the First Nation communities. Many of the First Nation have what's called septic field beds, and that's how they dispose of them. But generally speaking, we still have a huge gap in what Ontarians take for granted, what First Nations have in terms of their availability of the kind of water systems that are there. They're inadequate, I guess, is really what I'm trying to say, Stephen.
Well, let me go to, this is between the years 2006 and 2010. Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development Canada say they invested about $300+ million in water and wastewater infrastructure for First Nations in Ontario alone. What did this money go for?
Well, it probably mostly to catch up to old projects that have been on the books for some time. Some of it did go to providing the training for the operators in terms of these water treatment facilities. So training did take place in those periods of time. And I know our Ontario First Nation Tech Services Corporation, who looks at these things for First Nations in Ontario, did do the training for our First Nation communities. So they did expend a fair bit in those areas. And it was mostly to catch up. There was really nothing to address the Neegon-Burnside report assessment that the federal government had embarked upon to get done, to essentially say, or to at least provide and validate what First Nation leadership have been saying for quite some time. We've got a huge resource gap here. We've got a huge gap in terms of infrastructure that is providing potable water to our First Nation communities.
Neegon-Burnside is the contractor tasked with the assessment and also the projected growth. And what, do you recall a dollar figure put on what would be required?
Well, if we were to look at the next, I believe it was 10, 20 years, $1 billion in terms of the growth itself is what the First Nations would require to getting, again, acceptable water that would meet standards, that would meet the kind of regulations that Ontario has set.
Okay, you mentioned some numbers off the top, and as promised, I'm going to get to all of those numbers right now. So if we could, let's bring this up. This is the government's assessment of Ontario First Nation communities. They've inspected 120, water systems inspected 158, considered high risk, 72 out of 158 considered high risk. Medium risk, 61, low risk, 25. How about for wastewater systems inspected? That's the next one, 77. High risk, 28. Medium risk, 38. Low risk, 11. That's the report from the feds. What's your reaction to it?
Well, we have to address the immediate problems. I believe that's what the report calls for, is address the immediate problems where we know where those are. And I think they've been pointed out. We need to begin looking at how do we close some of this gap that's out there. We need to have discussion with the First Nation leadership and our operators and so on. We need to talk about how we move forward with recognizing the First Nation jurisdiction in terms of wanting to make sure that they have the water law, if you will, in their First Nation community that would talk about the standards and kind of protocols that are out there and the kind of regulations that they would have to meet.
Well, let's
First
understand.
Nations want to do that, and there are models out there. Akwesasne community down the road from Toronto here, between Toronto and Ottawa, near Cornwall, has had to deal with a number of jurisdictions, and they have their own water law and their own regulations. So it is being done, and it is being addressed. Again, it speaks to the capacity of First Nations and their administrations. If they do have a little bit of capacity, they will get the work done.
Let's understand this gap better, though. We're in the capital city of the province of Ontario right now, and my hunch is pretty much everybody who lives in this city, when they go to get a drink of water out of the tap, has 10 out of 10 confidence that they're going to be able to drink that water and not have any problems. On reserves, it's not 10 out of 10. What number out of 10 would you say it is?
It's probably closer to out of 10, maybe 2,
That
maybe
low.
1.
That low.
Yes, that's the concern, Steve. It really is an ongoing concern, and here's really what First Nations have been saying to the federal government. When you are passing legislation that impacts us, and our inability to deliver on that piece of legislation that talks about certain kind of regulations, we're not going to meet them because we don't have the infrastructure, and we don't have the capacity to meet those regulations. So, again, the federal government, all they're attempting to do is transfer the liability to the First Nation Council, which doesn't have, again, the sufficient capacity to address basic infrastructure issues that really need to be dealt with here.
Well, let's understand. Whose responsibility do you think this is to move from 1 or 2 out of 10 to 10 out of 10?
Well, it's the responsibility certainly of the federal government, of the First Nations, of the province that has impacted the source water through much of the development that has gone on over the years. Again, these are all individuals or people that need to come together to talk about how do we address this and how do we ensure that in the next couple of years that we do see those First Nations that have a medium to high risk address their issues and are not at risk. But we do need, again, all the parties to sit down and address the issues.
I'm going to share some more numbers with you now. A few months ago, Health Canada, this time, released some numbers on drinking water advisories in First Nations communities across the country. This is as of last November. And who was number 1? Ontario. This is not something you want to be number 1 at. 37 First Nations communities with drinking water advisories. Alberta next at 33, BC at 31, and then Saskatchewan at 20. Let's just understand what we're talking about here. A drinking water advisory means what?
Means you have to boil your water. It means you have to treat your water one way or another before you can consume it. And there's even advisories that are do not drink the water. So it's even more than the boil of water advisories.
Chief William Montour, whom you know from the Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve, spoke with us for a feature that's going to be on our website, says his community is in the midst of a, quote, water crisis. The water purification plant is 20 years old. It can't serve any more households or businesses. Any idea what's being done to deal with this immediate crisis?
I know the chief is working on it, and he's doing the best that he can along with his community, but that's just part of the issue. The other part of the issue is getting that water distributed once they have it treated. And the community has talked about the costs that is projected to go with that. Right now, they have a good number of their homes that are accommodated by their own well. And so we do have, again, I know the chief has said that we got to address this issue, and they are, again, working with the government officials. The problem that they have a lot of times is that the government is not wanting to recognize the jurisdiction of the First Nation, Six Nations, to essentially say, we'll develop the law, we'll develop the regulations, and we'll enforce them.
So
but we need
understand
capacity, though, to do that.
Again, I want to understand this. Are you saying that the federal government is not satisfied to transfer the money to your care and you will spend it and develop regulations yourself? Is that part of the issue here?
They don't fund that work. Okay, so all the federal government has been doing is providing barely basic infrastructure. And I'm going to go to some of the remote communities because that's where a lot of the issues are really are much more clear, if you will, in terms of believing that there's a problem here because the basic infrastructure is not found. When you go to Six Nations, as an example, you see all kinds of activity. You wouldn't think that water was a big issue,
right.
And yet it is. So I guess what I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you, Steve, is that it is. No matter where you are, if you're a remote community in Northern Ontario, or if you're in a lively area like where Six Nations is in, or Akwesasne. You know, there are issues around water, and First Nations have said that we need to talk about how the jurisdictions will recognize each other and support each other.
Well, talk to us about this. In our last few minutes here, let's talk solutions, because you know, of course, the Harper government has unveiled Bill S8. This is their Safe Drinking Water for First Nations Act. What do you think of it?
It didn't address what the First Nations have said. What the First Nations have said is that in order to talk about the kind of standards and the kind of regulations that we have to meet, we've got to have basic infrastructure that will meet that. And the department has received the assessment in terms of what needs to take place in terms of renovating and creating a new system where it needs it. They've got that report. They need an implementation plan on when these systems are going to be at a point where they can meet the standards and where they can meet regulations. But that's the first part in terms of what First Nation leadership has said. Work with us. You already have the data now. Let's work on the implementation plan of ensuring that these systems will be adequate, will not require medium or high level kind of what do you call it, settings or
okay, but is this bill salvageable, or do you think they have to scrap it and start again?
Well, we've said to the minister that the way that it is, the way that it came out, the way that it currently is in its current form, is not reflective of what First Nations have said, which is that we need to be self-determining in terms of what our laws and what our regulations are. We need to ensure that we continue to abide by the treaties that we've agreed to. And those treaties are the way forward in terms of what First Nations are saying, in terms of resource revenue sharing, in terms of how we relate as nation to nation or government to government.
Does this federal government adequately respect that, in your view?
Not at this point. We did go to the Crown First Nations gathering asking the Prime Minister to start by reaffirming the treaties as a starting point and agreeing that we have much work to do in terms of implementation.
Just tell me this, if this is a crisis, if people can't drink the water, what's more important? Getting the money flowing, getting the projects built, getting the water cleaned up, or working out, and I mean no disrespect when I put it this way, but or spending more time trying to figure out who's got jurisdiction over what and whether or not they respect your rights to do various things under treaties and all of that. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, Steve, and I agree that the health and well-being of our people is what's first and foremost. And they've always said, our people, if you were to ask them, the federal government, the Crown government needs to implement our treaties. All of our people will say those kind of sentiments at the same time as recognizing that there are huge gaps in infrastructure, there are huge gaps in education, there is huge gaps in social services, in our child welfare protection. So we have these situations where we've communicated our situation with government many times over, and we continue to see the current data that you rhymed off, even though we've registered with the federal government many times over. We've seen attempts at government wanting to address these. Again, I'm not wanting to belabor a point, but Kelowna was one attempt to address some of the gap that's been identified.
That was a policy of the previous Paul Martin government.
Yes, and again, we're having to re-emphasize where the needs are, and really the needs are if the federal government would sit down and talk about how we relate with one another, how those treaties are foundational, and how we need to move forward by recognizing that we're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. And how do we ensure that what we talked about, peaceful coexistence, as Indigenous peoples here in Turtle Island, what we call Canada, is something that we can continue to see for our future generations, this peaceful coexistence. But we can't have it on the backs of the First Nation poverty. The peaceful coexistence has to be resource revenue sharing included into the mix, where we will see our First Nations people flourish and take part in this huge economy as business people, as the educators, as the doctors, as even taking part, I would say, in terms of the legislative and the policy work if the First Nations want to do that. But the First Nations themselves, the nations, are saying this is the work that we have to do. And they are doing it. And they struggle because the resources aren't available. And the reason why resources aren't available is that the resource revenue sharing aspect of what our ancestors had agreed to by way of treaties is not taking place, not taking place to the degree that we understand it should be taking place.
Understood. Chief Toulouse, it's good of you to join us here at TVO tonight. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me again, Stu.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.